Aaravi Malhotra arrived in the UK hoping for a peaceful new life. But a secret she thought was buried would soon turn her world into a nightmare. Reyan Gohil, once calm and controlled, began to crumble the moment he discovered something he was never meant to see. Sahira Verma, the only person who knew the truth, was thousands of miles away and powerless to stop what was coming. Detective Callum Reeves would later uncover a trail of clues that revealed a darkness hidden behind closed doors. And neighbor Maya Hartwell witnessed small signs that hinted a tragedy was building long before anyone realized how deadly it would become. Aaravi Malhotra stepped into the cold London air with the hope of starting a life that would finally feel steady. She had dreamed of a peaceful future, far away from the financial struggles that followed her throughout her 20s. Now married to Reyan Gohil, she believed she had reached a turning point. The small brick house on a quiet street in South London felt like a place where she could grow, heal, and build something new. Everything around her seemed calm, almost too calm. Compared to the busy streets of Delhi she had left behind, Reyan was a man of routine. He woke up early, ironed his shirts with care, drank the same tea every morning, and left for work without ever being in a rush. His predictable lifestyle comforted Aaravi at first. She felt safe with someone who never raised his voice and rarely showed frustration. His silence felt gentle, and his presence brought her a sense of stability she had longed for. She tried to adapt to his world, one piece at a time. While Reyan spent long hours at his office job, Aaravi filled her days with small discoveries. She explored local shops, learned the bus routes, and took photographs of simple things like blooming flowers or raindrops on the window. She joined a cooking class at a community center and practiced new recipes every week. She kept herself busy, hoping to settle into her new surroundings without feeling like a stranger. But behind her calm routine existed truth she carried like a shadow. Months before marriage, when her life was financially unstable and she had no one to rely on, she created a secret online identity. It was the only way she could cover her expenses. She told no one except her close friend Sahira Verma back in India. The platform allowed her to survive a time when everything felt like it was falling apart. She always planned to delete it once she married and moved abroad. But life did not go as planned. Unexpected expenses back home forced her to continue posting in secret. She convinced herself this was temporary and harmless, as long as she kept her identity hidden. In London, she stayed cautious. She used a different name, never showed her full face, and posted only when Reyan was away. She believed the distance between her past and present life was wide enough to keep her safe from discovery. What she didn't know was that someone in the United Kingdom had recently subscribed to her account. Someone local, someone closer than she expected. The thought never crossed her mind. And so she continued like everything was normal. From the outside, her life looked peaceful. She smiled in photos, posted cheerful updates for her family, and shared recipes she had learned. She tried her best to be the perfect new bride, adjusting to a culture thousands of miles from home. But there were moments when she felt something tightening inside her, quiet fear that her secret might one day follow her into this new life. She pushed that fear away again and again, convincing herself that the past was behind her. Meanwhile, Reyan remained unaware. His life revolved around work deadlines, spreadsheets, and evening cricket highlights. He believed he had married a simple, kind woman ready to build a peaceful family with him. Their life, in his mind, was predictable and secure. He never imagined that anything unusual existed within the walls of their home. His trust ran deep, and his curiosity about technology was limited. Nothing in his routine hinted at trouble, but something subtle had already begun shifting around them. A small notification, a credit card charge that didn't match any purchase, an account login from a location close to their own neighborhood. Invisible threads were pulling their lives toward a dangerous discovery neither of them expected. Aaravi's days continued normally, but the calm that surrounded her was only an illusion. The life she had built was standing on fragile ground, and one simple mistake, one curious click, turned everything upside down. She had no idea that the secret she thought she buried would soon rise back to the surface, not quietly, but with the force that would tear apart everything she had hoped for. The storm was coming. Even if she couldn't feel the wind yet, Reyan Gohil had always been a man who trusted structure. His life moved according to well-planned steps, and he rarely drifted outside the lines he built for himself. That was why the unfamiliar subscription charge on his bank statement caught his attention so quickly. He assumed it was a billing error or some automatic renewal he had forgotten to cancel. He clicked the transaction casually, expecting nothing unusual. What he found instead was a link to a platform he had never used and had barely heard of. Confusion pulled him deeper, and curiosity pushed him further. When the page finally loaded, he felt an uneasy tug inside his chest. He saw blurred images, carefully cropped photos of a woman whose identity was hidden. The lighting, the angles, the jewelry, even the background colors, stirred something in his memory. He leaned closer to the screen, paused. And then the smallest detail shattered his sense of calm. A tiny birthmark on the shoulder of the woman in the image. A mark he had seen many times, in ordinary moments, without ever thinking twice. The face was hidden, but the truth wasn't. The realization didn't hit him all at once. It came like a slow, cold wave crawling up his spine, freezing everything it touched. He clicked through the posts with a trembling hand, each one cutting deeper. The profile name meant nothing to him, but the person behind it meant everything. He could not understand how something so big had been hidden from him so easily. His mind raced through memories, searching for signs he had missed. He felt a mixture of disbelief, shock, and humiliation beginning to take shape inside him. The charges were recent. Some posts were made while he was at work, believing his wife was spending the afternoon baking or studying recipes. The betrayal felt sharper because of the quietness of their life. He had given her a home, security, and space, yet she had continued something he considered unthinkable. His thoughts grew darker with every scroll. Each image deepened the crack inside him until it felt like a widening fault line. A shift entered the house without a sound. The air between Aaravi and Reyan thickened, even though neither of them spoke about what had been discovered. Reyan stopped asking about her day, stopped eating the meals she prepared, stopped giving even the small gestures he once gave without thinking. He watched her movements with a stiff expression, trying to control the storm rising inside him. The more he tried to suppress it, the more violent his emotions became. Aaravi noticed the change instantly. The silence wasn't normal anymore. It felt heavy, sharp, almost suffocating. She sensed something was wrong, but couldn't figure out what had caused such a sudden shift. She checked her OnlyFans account and noticed unusual logins from a local location. Fear crept into her mind. She tried deleting content quickly, hoping she could erase the damage before it reached her life. But deep down, she knew she might be too late. Reyan's behavior became unpredictable. He stayed up late, sitting at the dining table long after midnight, staring at nothing. He left his phone face down, something he never used to do. He came home earlier than usual some days, walking through the door with an energy that made Aaravi's skin crawl. He wasn't yelling, he wasn't questioning her, but the quiet tension in his eyes was worse than any outburst. It was the kind of silence that comes right before something breaks. Outside, the world continued normally. People walked their dogs, children played in the park, and neighbors carried groceries home. Among them was Maya Hartwell, whose house stood across from the Gohil home. She had observed small changes too. She noticed shadows moving sharply inside the frosted kitchen window late at night. She saw the way Reyan stood unusually still sometimes, as if lost in thought. She saw the frightened stiffness in Aaravi's movements whenever they passed each other. Maya dismissed it at first, telling herself she shouldn't interfere in someone else's marriage, but the moments she witnessed left a quiet uneasiness in her mind. Aaravi tried reaching out to her friend Sahira in India, hoping to find comfort or guidance. She typed long messages explaining how the house felt like it was closing in on her, but she deleted most of them before sending. She feared saying too much, unsure of what Reyan had discovered and how much danger she was in. Inside the house, Reyan's emotions were changing rapidly. His sense of betrayal twisted into anger. His confusion hardened into resentment. He felt as if his entire life had become a lie, and the peaceful future he had imagined with Aaravi had been crushed without warning. Every minute he spent with her only fueled the fire burning inside him. What neither of them knew was that the situation had already passed the point of return. The discovery had opened a door that could no longer be closed, and the storm that had started quietly was building fast, gathering strength with each passing hour. The tension inside the house was becoming dangerous, and the cracks in their life were only getting deeper. The breaking point was already on its way. The days that followed were filled with a tension, so heavy that even the smallest sound seemed sharp. Aaravi woke each morning with a strange tightness in her chest, a feeling she couldn't explain but couldn't ignore. Reyan's silence had changed shape. It wasn't the calm silence she once found comforting. It was a cold, watchful silence that followed her from room to room. He moved differently, as if something inside him had been rewired. She felt his eyes on her at odd moments, and each time she looked up, he looked away too slowly. She tried to distract herself with routines she once enjoyed. She baked bread, cleaned the house, and attempted new recipes, but none of it lifted the weight pressing down on her. Every corner of the house reminded her of the secret she feared someone might have discovered. She checked her OnlyFans activity again and again, hoping her suspicion was wrong, hoping the login location was a mistake. But the truth stared back at her every time. Someone in the UK had accessed her account. Someone close. Her mind replayed scenarios she didn't want to imagine, each one worse than the last. Sahira's messages back in India encouraged her to leave the house temporarily, to stay with someone until she felt safe. But Aaravi hesitated. She feared that leaving suddenly might make things worse. She feared looking guilty without knowing what she was guilty of in Reyan's eyes. She feared triggering something inside him that she didn't yet understand. So she stayed, hoping the tension would fade, hoping the balance would return. Reyan was on the edge, but he hit it well enough to keep her guessing. His world had shifted violently the moment he recognized her online identity, and the shock continued to simmer inside him. He replayed images he had seen on the platform, comparing them to moments in their daily life. Every smile she had given him now felt false. Every gesture seemed staged. He believed he had been tricked, humiliated, and played. His emotions twisted into something darker each time he thought about it. The betrayal echoed in his mind until it felt louder than anything else. He began observing her with a strange intensity. He listened to her footsteps, watched how she held her phone, noticed how she hesitated before entering rooms. He built theories inside his head, theories that grew more extreme as the hours passed. He convinced himself she had been using him the entire time. His anger branched into jealousy, suspicion, and resentment, emotion feeding the next until his thoughts felt uncontrollable. The house became a silent battlefield. Plates sat untouched on the dining table. Lights were left on in empty rooms. Nights passed with Reyan sitting awake, staring at nothing with a hollow expression. Sometimes he walked through the hallway at odd hours, checking if she was asleep, checking if she was hiding something else. The darkness inside him was spreading fast. Meanwhile, outside their home, the world saw just enough to sense that something wasn't right. Maya Hartwell noticed more than she realized. She saw Aaravi stepping outside to collect mail with a stiffness that didn't match her usual warmth. She noticed the way Reyan stood near the kitchen window longer than necessary, staring at the street with eyes that seemed lost in some private storm. Maya wondered if she should ask if everything was okay, but she feared embarrassing them or stepping out of line. The hesitation kept her quiet, but the feeling that something was wrong stayed with her. Inside the house, the atmosphere grew more suffocating by the day. One evening, Aaravi packed a small bag quietly, slipping in only essential items. She didn't know exactly where she would go, but she knew she needed a backup plan. She placed the bag behind her clothes in the closet, thinking she would leave early the next morning, before Reyan woke up. She hoped she could escape the tension without a confrontation. She hoped he would never discover the bag. But Reyan's suspicions had already sharpened. He noticed every shift in her behavior, every nervous glance, every quiet step. He began interpreting everything as confirmation of guilt. The idea that she might leave him pushed his emotions into even more dangerous territory. He felt like control was slipping through his fingers, and something inside him hardened with that fear. The storm inside the house had reached a point where neither of them could outrun what was coming. The walls seemed to trap their emotions. The air felt heavy with unspoken danger. And the growing distance between them was no longer just emotional light, was threatening to become something far worse. The breaking point was no longer approaching. It was already waiting in the next room. The night that would change everything began quietly, almost deceptively calm. A thin layer of fog rolled over the neighborhood streets, softening the glow of the street lamps. Inside the Gohil home, the silence felt heavier than ever. It wrapped around the walls like a cold presence, creeping into every room. Aaravi moved carefully through the house, sensing something unfamiliar in the air. Her nerves were stretched thin, and each step made her heart tighten. She had spent the entire day thinking about leaving. The packed bag in her closet felt like a ticking clock. Every time she passed the bedroom door, she felt its presence pulling at her fear. She kept telling herself she would leave the next morning, before the sun came up, before Reyan could stop her. But fear has its own timing, and danger rarely waits for dawn. Reyan had come home earlier that evening, walking inside with a strange, rigid calm. The softness that once lived in his expressions was gone. His face looked drained, as if emotion had been replaced with something colder, something determined. He barely made any sound as he moved through the house, but his presence filled every corner. His eyes followed her, not with curiosity, but with a storm hidden behind a cracked surface. Hours passed in an uneasy stillness. Reyan sat in the living room staring at the dark television screen. His mind spun through images, memories, and imagined betrayals, each one twisting deeper into the one thought that consumed him. The idea of losing control, losing face, losing his version of the truth pushed him toward a dangerous edge. His emotions had tangled into something violent, and he no longer had the strength to untangle them. Aaravi tried to stay in her room, pretending to read a book she couldn't focus on. Her hands trembled as she turned the pages. She listened for footsteps, waiting for signs that he had gone to sleep. But he didn't sleep. Not that night. The house felt like a trap she didn't know how to escape. When she finally worked up the courage to step outside her room, she found him standing in the hallway. His posture was stiff, his shadow long and distorted on the wall. She froze, sensing the shift in him as clearly as a chilling breeze. The confrontation that followed didn't begin with words. It began with the weight of everything unsaid. Reyan's emotions erupted in a sudden surge, years of discipline shattering in seconds. The storm inside him finally broke free. His rage, born from betrayal and confusion, turned into physical force before she could retreat. The house that once held hopes for a peaceful life now echoed with the violent crash of a reality neither of them was prepared to face. Aaravi tried to escape, pushing toward the hallway, toward the front door, toward anything that felt like safety. But Reyan was consumed by the dark spiral of his own emotions, acting on instinct rather than thought. His anger drove him, each moment heavier and more destructive than the last. Furniture shifted, objects fell, and the struggle moved through the house like a chaotic wave. The violence was relentless, fueled by everything he had kept buried until now. Outside, the night was still. Maya Hartwell walked her dog along the quiet street, her footsteps gentle on the pavement. She paused for a moment when she heard a faint, dull sound, something hitting the floor or a wall. It didn't sound like a scream, more like a heavy thud swallowed by the walls of a closed-up home. She glanced toward the Gohil house, but convinced herself it was nothing more than a dropped item or a slammed door. The fog muffled everything, and silence quickly returned. Inside, the fight had reached its final point. Aaravi's strength slipped away as the violence continued without pause. She collapsed, unable to defend herself any longer. The room settled into a cold stillness, the echoes of the struggle fading into a silence that felt unnatural. Reyan stood in the center of the living room, breathing hard, staring at what he had done. The realization didn't bring clarity. It brought panic. He stepped back, almost tripping, as fear surged through him. He tried to rewind the moment in his mind, but there was no undoing what had happened. His life, his marriage, his future had all collapsed in one catastrophic moment. Driven by desperation, he scrambled to create a story that shifted the blame away from him. He forced scratches on the door, moved items around, scattered objects to mimic a break-in. His hands shook as he staged the scene, and the fear of being caught clouded every choice he made. In his panic, he overlooked details that would later betray him. By dawn, the house looked chaotic, but not convincing. Reyan picked up his phone with trembling fingers and called for help, pretending he had just discovered the scene. His voice wavered, but he hoped fear would pass as shock. What he didn't know was that the truth had already begun leaving its footprints behind, waiting for the investigators who would soon arrive to unravel everything. The tragedy was complete, but the consequences were only beginning. Detective Callum Reeves arrived at the Gohil residence just as the sun began to rise, casting a pale light across the quiet street. The house looked undisturbed from the outside, but the moment he stepped through the doorway, he sensed something was wrong. The air felt unnaturally still. The objects scattered across the floor looked staged, not like the chaotic aftermath of a real struggle. The feeling in the room didn't match the story Reyan had shakily given in his emergency call. The first responders had already secured the scene. The sight of Aaravi's lifeless body on the living room floor created an unsettling silence among the team. Nothing about her injuries matched Reyan's claim of finding her after a break-in. Her wounds were too personal, too targeted, and too violent for an intruder who supposedly fled without taking anything. Reeves had seen enough cases to recognize the signs of a staged crime. The lack of forced entry, the untouched valuables, and the odd placement of furniture all raised immediate suspicion. Reyan stood nearby, pacing in small circles, wiping his hands on his clothes repeatedly. His movements were jittery, his face pale, and his breathing sharp. He kept glancing toward the investigators, then looking away quickly. Reeves watched him carefully, noting every small detail. People who experienced real shock tended to freeze or break down, but Reyan's behavior was a mixture of fear and calculation. It was the kind of nervous energy that suggested he was waiting for someone to believe his version of events. The forensic team began their work. They noticed marks on the front door that appeared too shallow and too fresh, as if someone had created them in a hurry without understanding how real break-ins looked. The smudges on the doorframe matched Reyan's fingerprints, raising an immediate red flag. The scattered objects in the living room showed no sign of accidental placement. Many were too neatly positioned, as if someone had tossed them while thinking about how chaos should appear. Reeves moved through each room, letting the details speak for themselves. He found the packed bag inside the bedroom closet, partially hidden behind clothing. That single item shifted the direction of the investigation instantly. Victims preparing to run do not normally fall into the hands of random criminals. The bag suggested fear, urgency, and an attempt to escape from someone inside the house. The digital team arrived and soon pulled data from both Aaravi and Reyan's devices. It didn't take long before the truth of the OnlyFans account surfaced. The platform logs revealed recent activity, including a subscriber from a location matching Reyan's home. The timestamps of account access overlapped with Reyan's work hours on certain days and his late-night sessions on others. The email, notifications, the credit card charges, and the searched keywords about discovering a partner's secret online life painted a clear motive. Reyan's story crumbled quickly under questioning. His timeline shifted each time Reeves asked for clarification, as if he were adjusting it on the spot. The more he tried to explain himself, the deeper he sank into contradictions. His fear became visible in the way he clutched the edges of his shirt, the way his eyes darted between the detectives, and the way sweat gathered on his forehead despite the cool morning air. Neighbors were interviewed next. Maya Hartwell's testimony proved crucial. She mentioned hearing a heavy thud the night before, something she had initially dismissed. She described the tense atmosphere she had sensed over the past few days. Her words strengthened the suspicion already forming in the investigative files. With evidence piling up, Reeves knew the case was moving in a clear direction. Staged break-in was sloppy. The digital trail was undeniable. The emotional buildup inside the house told a story of rising tension leading to a violent eruption. Everything pointed to one conclusion. This was not an attack by a stranger. It was a crime born from rage, betrayal, and a breaking point that had been slowly approaching for days. When the handcuffs finally clicked around Reyan's wrists, he lowered his head, no longer trying to fight the narrative. The weight of what he had done settled onto him with a crushing force. His future was gone, His life as he knew it had ended the moment he let anger guide his actions. The case spread quickly through the media, sparking debates about hidden online identities, cultural pressure, and dangerous emotional spirals. But beneath the headlines was a simple, tragic truth. A young woman searching for stability had been caught between her past and her future. The secret she hoped would stay buried became the spark that destroyed everything. As the investigation closed and the trial began, Reeves knew this case would remain with him. Not because of the violence, but because of the quiet signs everyone overlooked. The tension in the house, the fear in Aaravi's movements, the hesitation of the neighbor. The details that seemed small at the time, but carried the weight of a warning. A warning that had come too late. Story ended in tragedy, but its echoes would continue, reminding everyone who heard it how quickly a life can unravel when fear, secrets, and anger collide behind closed doors.